The rain hit the window so hard that Maria Delgado almost dropped the plate she was carrying. Lightning cracked across the sky outside the diner, and for 1 second, every light in the building flickered. Her hands were shaking, but not from the storm. She had exactly $4 left in her pocket, and payday was still 3 days away. She placed the plate down in front of a trucker at the counter, forced a smile, and walked back toward the kitchen. Her feet ached. She had been on her shift for 9 hours straight, and her stomach had been growling for the last 2 of them. She reached into the small paper bag she kept behind the counter. Inside was a turkey sandwich, wrapped in wax paper, the only meal she had packed for herself that day. It was supposed to be her dinner. Before she could take a single bite, the bell above the diner door rang. A gust of cold wind rushed in, carrying rain with it. Maria looked up and saw a man and a little girl standing just inside the doorway. The man was tall, with a rough beard and tired eyes. His jacket was soaked through, and he had his arm wrapped protectively around the girl, who could not have been older than 7. Her small shoes were falling apart at the seams, and she was shivering. They did not sit down, they just stood near the door, as if they were not sure they were allowed to be there. Maria noticed the way the man kept glancing over his shoulder, out toward the parking lot, like he was checking for something, or someone. "Table for 2? Maria asked gently, wiping her hands on her apron. The man hesitated. "We're just getting out of the rain, ma'am. We don't need a table." Maria looked at the little girl. Her eyes were fixed on the pie case near the register, the kind of look only a hungry child gives to food they cannot have. Maria had seen that look before. She had worn that same look herself, many years ago, in a small apartment above a laundromat, where dinner was sometimes just crackers and water. She didn't think twice. She walked back to the counter, picked up her sandwich, and brought it over to them. "Here," she said, holding it out. "It's not much, but it's fresh. Turkey, lettuce, a little mustard." The man's eyes widened. "We can't take your food." "You're not taking it. I'm giving it. There's a difference." Maria smiled at the girl. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Sophia," the girl whispered. "Well, Sophia, that sandwich has your name written all over it. Go ahead." The man looked at Maria for a long moment, studying her face like he was trying to memorize it. Then, slowly, he took the sandwich and knelt down to split it in half, giving the larger piece to his daughter. He ate the rest without a word, his eyes never quite meeting Maria's again. "Thank you," he finally said, his voice low and rough. "You don't know what this means." "It's just a sandwich," Maria said, laughing softly. "Don't make me cry over here." The man managed a small smile, the first one Maria had seen from him. He guided Sophia toward the door, glancing outside again before stepping out into the rain. Maria watched them go, walking quickly down the sidewalk and disappearing around the corner of the building. She never saw which direction they went after that. She never saw a car. It was as if they had appeared out of nowhere and vanished just as fast. She shrugged it off and went back to work, her stomach empty for the rest of the night. She didn't think much more about it. People came through the diner all the time, tired and hungry and stretched thin by life. It was a small town, but it had its share of hard luck stories. She had simply added one more small kindness to a long list of small kindnesses she had given over the years, never expecting anything in return. What Maria did not know was that the man she had just fed was one of the most careful, most guarded, and most talked about men in the entire country. Vincent Moretti had not eaten a full meal in 2 days. He had not slept in a real bed in nearly a week. Every decision he made, every step he took, was calculated to keep himself and his daughter one step ahead of people who wanted to find them. For years, Vincent had lived a life most people only saw in movies. He ran things, big things, the kind of operation that moved through cities like a hidden current, unseen by most, but felt by everyone who crossed its path. He had a name that made grown men nervous, a reputation that traveled faster than he ever needed to. But 3 weeks earlier, everything had changed. A deal had gone wrong. Trust had been broken, and suddenly, the very organization he had built and protected for over a decade had turned against him. He had grabbed Sophia in the middle of the night, taken nothing but a bag of cash and 2 changes of clothes, and driven until the car ran out of gas 2 states away. Since then, They had been moving from town to town, sleeping in cheap motels under fake names, always watching, always listening for footsteps that did not belong. That night, in that small diner, something happened that Vincent had not expected. A stranger, a woman who owed him nothing, who did not know his name or his history, had looked at his exhausted daughter and simply chosen kindness. No hesitation, no questions, just kindness. It hit him harder than he expected. In his world, nothing was ever given without a price. Every favor came with a debt attached. Every smile hid a motive. He had spent so long inside that world that he had almost forgotten people like Maria existed, people who gave because giving was simply who they were. He walked several blocks that night with Sophia's small hand in his, replaying the moment over and over. The way the woman had knelt slightly to meet Sophia's eyes, the way she had laughed, easy and warm, like feeding strangers, was the most natural thing in the world to her. He found himself, for the first time in weeks, thinking about something other than danger. They found shelter that night in an old motel just outside of town, the kind of place that did not ask many questions as long as cash was paid up front. Sophia fell asleep almost instantly, curled up under a thin blanket, finally full and finally warm. Vincent sat by the window, watching the parking lot, running numbers in his head. He needed a plan. He needed money that could not be traced. He needed somewhere safer than this. But his mind kept drifting back to the diner, to the woman with the kind eyes and the tired smile, who had given away her only meal without a second thought. He did not know her name. He had not thought to ask. In his line of work, forgetting to gather information was almost unheard of, but that night, he had been too overwhelmed to think clearly. He decided, quietly, that he would find a way to thank her properly. Not that night. Not the next day. It was too dangerous to go back so soon. But someday, when things settled, if they ever did, he would return. The next morning, Maria woke up on the couch in her small apartment, the television still playing quietly from the night before. She had fallen asleep after her shift, too tired to even change out of her uniform. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she had given away her dinner and had nothing left in the fridge except half a carton of eggs and some bread. She made herself a simple breakfast and headed back to the diner for another long shift. Life did not pause for anyone, and Bills did not care how tired she was. She thought briefly about the man and the little girl from the night before, hoping they had found somewhere warm and safe to sleep. She hoped Sophia was not too cold. She said a small, quiet prayer for them, without even realizing she was doing it, the way people do when kindness becomes a habit rather than a decision. Weeks passed. The diner stayed busy, the tips stayed small, and Maria kept working double shifts to cover rent. She had grown used to stretching every dollar as far as it could go, learning to make a can of soup last 2 meals and a bag of rice last a week. It was not an easy life, but it was hers, and she had learned long ago to find small joys in it. The way sunlight hit the counter in the morning, the regulars who always asked about her day, the occasional stranger who left a bigger tip than expected, just because they noticed she was trying her best. She had almost completely forgotten about the man and his daughter from that rainy night. Almost. One afternoon, as she was wiping down the counter during a rare quiet moment, the bell above the door rang again. She looked up out of habit, expecting another regular or a tired traveler passing through. Instead, she saw a man standing in the doorway, cleaner now, dressed in a plain jacket, his beard trimmed neatly. It took her a second to recognize him. "You," she said softly, setting down her rag. "From that rainy night, with the little girl." The man nodded, stepping inside slowly, almost cautiously, as if he still was not sure he belonged in a place so ordinary. "I wasn't sure you'd remember me." "I don't forget faces," Maria said, smiling, "or hungry little girls, staring at my pie case." He laughed, a real laugh this time, warmer than the polite smile from before. "She still talks about that sandwich, you know. Best one she ever had, according to her." "High praise from a 7-year-old, Maria said, leaning against the counter. "Where is she today?" "Staying with someone I trust for a few hours," he said. "I wanted to come back, alone, to properly thank you." Maria waved a hand. "It was just a sandwich." "It wasn't just a sandwich," the man said, his voice quieter now, more serious. You have no idea what that night meant to us, to me. Something about the way he said it made Maria pause. There was a weight behind his words, a kind of gratitude that went deeper than good manners. She studied his face for a moment, noticing the way his eyes carried something heavy behind them, something he was clearly not ready to explain. Well, she said finally, deciding not to push. You're welcome. Anytime you're hungry, you know where to find me. He reached into his jacket and placed something on the counter before she could stop him. A folded envelope. For you, he said. Please, don't argue. I don't need. Please, he interrupted gently. Let me do this. Maria hesitated, then slowly picked up the envelope. She did not open it in front of him. Something about the moment felt too personal, too important to turn into a transaction right there at the counter. Thank you, she said instead. What's your name, by the way? I never asked. He paused for just a beat too long. Vincent, he said finally. Nice to meet you properly, Vincent. I'm Maria. I know, he said, glancing at the small name tag pinned to her apron, smiling slightly. Maria, it suits you. He left shortly after, promising to return, though he did not say when. Maria watched him go, the same way she had watched him disappear into the rain weeks earlier, except this time, there was less mystery and more warmth in the memory. Later that night, alone in her apartment, she finally opened the envelope. Inside was more cash than she made in 2 full weeks at the diner, along with a small handwritten note. It simply said, "Thank you for reminding me that good people still exist." Maria sat there for a long time, staring at the money, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and confusion. Who was this man? Why did such a simple act of kindness mean so much to him? She did not know the answer yet, and she would not know it for a while longer. But something told her that Vincent and his daughter were about to become a much bigger part of her life than she ever expected. The universe, it seemed, was not finished writing this particular story, not even close. Vincent returned to the diner 3 more times over the following month, always alone at first, always with a reason that sounded simple on the surface. He wanted coffee. He wanted to see if the pie was as good as it looked. He wanted, more than anything, to sit in a place that felt normal, even for 20 minutes, even if normal was something he had never truly known. Maria began to look forward to his visits, though she could not fully explain why. There was something about him that did not add up. His clothes were plain, but his watch was expensive. His words were careful, almost rehearsed, but his eyes softened whenever he spoke about Sophia. He never talked about his work, and Maria had stopped asking. She figured everyone was allowed a few secrets, and hers was not to pry into things that were not offered freely. On his 4th visit, he brought Sophia along again. The little girl lit up the moment she saw Maria, running straight to the counter and climbing onto a stool like she had been coming to that diner her whole life. I want the sandwich again, Sophia announced. The same one. Turkey. Coming right up, Maria said, laughing as she grabbed bread from behind the counter. You know, most kids your age ask for chicken fingers or milkshakes. You're a turkey sandwich kind of girl. I respect that. Daddy says I have good taste, Sophia said proudly. Vincent smiled from his seat, watching the exchange with a kind of quiet peace that rarely showed on his face. For those few minutes, sitting in a small diner booth with his daughter laughing beside him, and a kind stranger teasing her about sandwiches, he almost felt like an ordinary man living an ordinary life. It was a feeling he had chased for years without ever finding it, buried under deals, threats, and responsibilities that never seemed to end. What Vincent never told Maria, not that day and not for a long while after, was the truth about who he really was. Vincent Moretti had built an empire that stretched across several states, an empire built on control, fear, and an iron set of rules that nobody was allowed to break, including himself. For years, he had lived by those rules, believing they kept him and everyone under him alive. But rules built on fear eventually turn on the person who enforces them, and 3 months earlier, that was exactly what happened. A trusted partner, someone Vincent had known for over a decade, had made a deal behind his back with a rival group. The details were complicated, tangled in years of loyalty and betrayal that most people would never fully understand, but the result was simple. Vincent became a target. Worse, so did Sophia. The night he took her and ran, he had made a decision that shocked even himself. He chose his daughter over everything he had built. He chose to disappear rather than fight, understanding that fighting back would only put Sophia in more danger. It was the first time in years that Vincent had made a choice based purely on love rather than strategy, and it terrified him more than any business decision ever had. Since then, life had been a careful, exhausting dance of survival. Fake names on motel registers, cash only, never cards, constant movement, never staying anywhere longer than necessary. He had learned to read rooms the moment he walked into them, checking exits, watching faces, always ready to grab Sophia and disappear if something felt wrong. But something about this small town felt different. It felt quiet in a way that made him nervous at first, and then, slowly, in a way that made him relax. Nobody here knew his name. Nobody looked twice at him. He had rented a small house on the edge of town under a name that did not belong to him, paying in cash through a contact who owed him a favor from long ago. It was not permanent. It could not be permanent. But it was somewhere Sophia could sleep in a real bed and go to sleep without him watching the door every 10 minutes. And then there was Maria. Vincent found himself thinking about her more than he expected to. Not in a romantic way, not yet, but in a way that felt like relief. She represented something he had not encountered in years, a person whose kindness had no strings attached. In his world, kindness was currency. People were nice to him because they wanted something, because they feared him, or because they hoped to gain favor. Maria wanted nothing. She had given him and Sophia a sandwich because she had food and they did not. Simple as that. He began to visit, not just for the comfort of the diner, but because being around Maria reminded him of who he used to be before power and fear had reshaped him into someone he barely recognized anymore. Maria, for her part, had no idea any of this was happening beneath the surface. She simply saw a father who clearly loved his daughter deeply, a man who seemed to be going through something difficult, but who never burdened her with details she had not asked for. She respected that. In her own life, she had learned that everyone carried something heavy, and not everyone wanted to talk about it. Sometimes the kindest thing you could do was simply be present without demanding explanations. Over the following weeks, their visits became a quiet routine. Vincent and Sophia would come by 2 or 3 times a week, usually in the early afternoon when the diner was less busy. Maria would slip Sophia extra fries when her manager was not looking, and Sophia would draw pictures on napkins that she proudly presented before they left. Vincent always left generous tips, though never as extreme as that first envelope, careful not to draw attention or make Maria uncomfortable. One afternoon, as Sophia colored quietly in a booth with a stack of napkins and a borrowed pen, Vincent lingered at the counter longer than usual. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure," Maria replied, wiping down the counter out of habit rather than necessity. "Why did you do it? That first night, you didn't know us. You had every reason to keep that sandwich for yourself." Maria paused, considering the question seriously rather than brushing it off with a joke like she usually did. "I grew up without much," she said finally. "There were nights my mom split a single can of soup between me and my 2 brothers, and she wouldn't eat until we were done, even if that meant she went to bed hungry. I remember what it felt like to be hungry as a kid. I remember what it felt like when someone was kind to us for no reason. It stuck with me. So when I saw your daughter looking at that pie case the way I used to look at things I couldn't have, I couldn't sit there and eat in front of her. It wasn't some big decision. It just felt like the only thing to do." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, processing her words. "Not everyone would have made that choice," he said finally. "Most people walk past hunger every single day and don't even notice it." "Maybe," Maria said with a shrug. "Or maybe most people notice it and just don't know what to do about it. It's easier to look away than to face it. I get it. I'm not judging anyone for that." "You should be proud of who you are," Vincent said, his voice unusually sincere. "Not many people have that kind of goodness left in them. Life tends to wear it down." "Has life worn yours down?" Maria asked, half joking, half genuinely curious. Vincent looked down at his coffee, turning the cup slowly in his hands. More than I'd like to admit, he said quietly. Maria did not press further, sensing the conversation had drifted somewhere he was not ready to go. Instead, she changed the subject, asking about Sophia's favorite cartoons, and the tension in Vincent's shoulders slowly eased as the conversation moved to lighter things. As the weeks passed, Sophia began to see Maria as more than just the nice lady from the diner. She started asking her father if they could visit even on days they did not need to, simply because she liked spending time there. She would sit at the counter swinging her legs, telling Maria about her day, about the ducks she had seen at a nearby pond, about the picture book she was reading before bed. Maria found herself growing attached to the little girl in a way she had not expected, a warmth that reminded her of the nieces and nephews she rarely got to see since her family had scattered across different states over the years. Vincent watched this bond form with a strange mixture of relief and worry. Relief, because Sophia deserved stability and warmth after months of constant movement and fear. Worry, because the more attached they became to Maria, and to this small, quiet town, the harder it would be to leave if danger ever found them again. And in his line of work, danger always found a way to catch up eventually. It was simply a matter of time. Still, for the first time since fleeing his old life, Vincent allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they had finally found a place to breathe. He began quietly making arrangements, testing the waters to see if a permanent life here was even possible. He reached out, carefully, and through trusted channels only, to see how much heat was still on his trail. The answers he received were not entirely reassuring, but they were not immediately alarming either. It seemed, for now, that whoever was looking for him had lost the scent, at least temporarily. He allowed himself one more risk. He began looking into small, quiet businesses in town that he could buy under a different name, something legitimate, something that could provide him and Sophia with a stable income without drawing attention. It was a slow, careful process, the kind that required patience he had not needed in years, since his old life moved fast and demanded quick, decisive action. Meanwhile, Maria remained blissfully unaware of the storm quietly brewing beneath the surface of the friendship she had built with Vincent and Sophia. To her, they were simply a father and daughter who had become regulars at the diner, people she had grown fond of without expecting anything in return. She had no idea that the man she teased about ordering the same sandwich every time was someone whose name alone could once make grown men change their plans out of fear. She had no idea that her simple act of kindness on a rainy night had already begun to change the course of 3 lives, weaving them together in a way that none of them could yet fully understand. And she certainly had no idea that the quiet peace they had all found in that small town was about to be tested in ways she could never have imagined. For now, though, life continued in its simple rhythm: diner shifts, Sophia's napkin drawings, Vincent's quiet visits, a friendship built on something rare and honest in a world that so often rewarded exactly the opposite. It was fragile, this peace they had found, though none of them yet realized just how fragile it truly was. The first sign that something was wrong came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, though Maria did not recognize it as a sign at the time. A man she had never seen before walked into the diner and took a seat near the window instead of the counter. He ordered black coffee and nothing else, and he did not touch his phone or read a newspaper the way most solo customers did. He simply sat, watching the street outside through the glass, occasionally glancing toward the door whenever the bell rang. Maria refilled his coffee twice without much thought. Strangers passed through town often enough, especially with the new highway exit that had opened a few months earlier, bringing more travelers than the town was used to. Still, something about the way he studied every person who walked past the window stuck with her, even if she could not explain why. Later that same week, Vincent arrived at the diner looking more tense than Maria had ever seen him. Sophia was not with him this time, which was unusual, since she rarely missed a chance to visit. He sat at the counter, ordered coffee he barely touched, and kept glancing toward the door in a way that mirrored the strange man from earlier in the week, though Maria did not consciously connect the two moments. "Everything okay?" Maria asked, leaning against the counter. "Fine," Vincent said quickly, too quickly. "Just a long week." "Where's my favorite customer?" Maria asked, trying to lighten the mood. "With a friend," Vincent said. "I needed to handle a few things today." Maria studied him for a moment. There were dark circles under his eyes that had not been there before, and his hands, usually so steady, tapped restlessly against the counter. "You know," she said carefully, "if something's going on, you can talk to me. I'm a decent listener, even if I mostly just nod and pretend I understand." Vincent managed a small, tired smile. "I appreciate that, truly, but it's complicated." "Most things worth caring about usually are," Maria replied simply. He looked at her for a long moment, as if weighing how much he could say without saying too much. "Let's just say I made some choices a long time ago that I'm still paying for," he said finally. "Choices that follow you, no matter how far you run." "We all have those," Maria said gently. "Doesn't mean you can't build something better now." Vincent nodded slowly, though his eyes carried a weight that suggested he was not entirely convinced. He finished his coffee, left a generous tip as always, and left without saying much more. Maria watched him go, feeling a small knot of worry settle in her stomach that she could not quite explain. That night, alone in her apartment, Maria turned on the local news while making dinner, mostly for background noise, rather than any real interest in current events. She was chopping vegetables when a headline caught her attention. Federal authorities continue search for organized crime figure believed to be traveling with a young child. The anchor's voice was calm and professional, the kind of tone reserved for stories that were serious but not yet fully confirmed. Maria glanced at the screen out of habit, not really processing the details until a photograph appeared beside the anchor. It was a formal photograph, the kind used for official documents, showing a man in a suit with a serious expression, his hair shorter and his face cleanly shaven. For a brief moment, Maria almost did not recognize him. Almost. Her knife stopped moving. The vegetables sat forgotten on the cutting board. She stared at the screen, her mind racing to reconcile the image in front of her with the man she had come to know over the past several weeks. The eyes were the same. The set of the jaw, even beneath a different amount of beard, was unmistakably familiar. The anchor continued speaking, mentioning a name Maria had heard exactly once, spoken quietly across a diner counter. Vincent Moretti. Wanted for questioning in connection with several ongoing investigations, believed to be traveling with his young daughter after fleeing, following an internal conflict within a criminal organization based out of the Northeast. Maria sat down slowly at her kitchen table, her legs suddenly unsteady beneath her. The room seemed to tilt slightly, the ordinary sounds of her apartment fading into a kind of ringing silence. She thought of Sophia's laughter, of the napkin drawings still sitting in a small pile on her nightstand, of the quiet, careful way Vincent always spoke, like every word had been chosen with extreme caution. Suddenly, so many small details made a different kind of sense. His caution, his careful movements, the stranger in the diner earlier that week, watching the street with an intensity that no ordinary traveler would need. She did not sleep much that night. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, running through every conversation she had ever had with Vincent, searching for signs she might have missed, wondering how she could have spent so many hours with a man capable of things she could barely imagine, and yet feel nothing but warmth and gratitude toward him. It did not make sense, and yet, somehow, it also did. The next morning, she went to work in a daze, her mind still spinning with unanswered questions. Should she call the number the news had flashed on screen? Should she confront Vincent directly? Should she simply disappear from his life quietly, avoiding any further involvement in something clearly far bigger and more dangerous than she had ever imagined? She was wiping down tables during the lunch rush when the bell above the door rang, and she looked up to see Vincent and Sophia walking in together. Sophia practically skipping toward the counter, with a new drawing clutched in her small hands. Maria froze for a fraction of a second before forcing herself to smile, though her heart was pounding so loudly she was certain everyone in the diner could hear it. "Look what I made," Sophia announced proudly, climbing onto her usual stool and presenting a crayon drawing of 3 figures standing beside what appeared to be a diner. "That's you, that's me, and that's Daddy. We're all friends." Maria looked at the drawing, feeling a lump rise in her throat that she had to swallow down before speaking. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," she managed. "I'm going to put this one somewhere special." Vincent watched the exchange with his usual quiet warmth, though something in Maria's expression must have registered as different. because his smile faded slightly as he studied her face. "Are you feeling all right?" he asked carefully. "You seem tired." "Long night," Maria said, forcing another smile. "Didn't sleep well." He nodded, accepting the explanation, though his eyes lingered on her a moment longer than usual, as if sensing something beneath the surface that did not quite add up. Maria busied herself taking their order, grateful for the excuse to step away and collect her racing thoughts in the quiet of the kitchen. Standing behind the counter, watching Vincent help Sophia with her coloring, watching the gentle, patient way he interacted with his daughter despite whatever chaos existed in the rest of his life, Maria found herself facing a question she had never expected to confront. Could a person be capable of the things she had heard on the news and still be, in some fundamental way, a good father? Could danger and gentleness exist within the same person at the same time? She did not have an answer. Not yet, but she knew, with a certainty that surprised her, that she was not ready to simply walk away from Sophia, or from the strange, careful friendship that had formed between herself and Vincent over the past several weeks. Whatever he had done in his past, whatever world he had come from, the man sitting in her diner treated his daughter with a tenderness that felt entirely real, and Maria had learned long ago to trust what she saw with her own eyes over what strangers said on a television screen. Still, fear had planted itself firmly in her chest, and it was not going away easily. She spent the rest of her shift glancing toward the windows more often than usual, watching the parking lot the way Vincent always did, suddenly understanding exactly why he had always seemed so alert, so careful, so unwilling to fully relax even in the quietest moments. By the time her shift ended, Maria had made a decision, though it was not an easy one. She would talk to Vincent, not to accuse him, not to demand explanations he might not be ready to give, but simply to understand. She owed herself that much clarity, especially now that Sophia had become someone she genuinely cared about, someone whose safety mattered to her in a way she had not expected when she handed over a simple sandwich on a rainy night weeks earlier. She waited until closing time, when the diner had emptied, and only the hum of the refrigerators broke the silence. She sent a short message to the number Vincent had given her weeks earlier, the one he said to use only if something urgent came up. "Can we talk?" she wrote simply. "Alone." The reply came within minutes. "I'll be there in 20. Maria sat at the counter, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she was too nervous to drink, waiting for a conversation that would either confirm her worst fears or somehow, impossibly, ease them. She did not know which outcome she was hoping for more. She only knew that the quiet, simple life she had built for herself, one small kindness at a time, was about to change in ways she could not yet fully predict. Vincent arrived exactly 20 minutes later, slipping through the front door of the darkened diner after Maria unlocked it for him. He looked around the empty room, taking in the flipped chairs and dimmed lights, before his eyes settled on Maria, who stood behind the counter with her arms crossed, trying to appear calmer than she felt. "You said it was urgent," he said, his voice careful, measured. "Is Sophia all right? Did something happen?" "Sophia's fine," Maria said quickly. "This isn't about her. Not directly, anyway." Vincent's shoulders relaxed slightly, though the tension in his posture remained. He waited, sensing that Maria needed a moment to find her words. "I saw the news last night," she said finally, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. "Your face, your name, Vincent Moretti." The silence that followed stretched long enough that Maria began to wonder if he would deny it entirely, if he would try to explain it away with some story about mistaken identity or a distant relative who shared his name. Instead, Vincent simply closed his eyes for a moment, exhaling slowly, as if a weight he had been carrying for weeks had finally, inevitably, come crashing down. "I was hoping I'd have more time before this happened," he said quietly. "So it's true," Maria said, though it was not really a question. "Yes," Vincent said simply, "it's true." Maria felt her stomach tighten, though she was not entirely sure if it was fear or something closer to relief that he had not tried to lie to her. "Tell me," she said. "All of it. I think I deserve that much, don't you?" Vincent nodded slowly and pulled out a stool, sitting down across from her at the counter. For the next hour, he spoke more openly than he had with anyone in years, explaining pieces of a life he had spent decades protecting from outsiders. He told her about growing up with very little, about being pulled into a world that promised power and protection to a young man who had neither. He told her about years of careful decisions that slowly built into an organization he eventually controlled, an organization built on rules that kept order among dangerous people, even if those rules came at a steep personal cost. He did not glorify any of it. If anything, he spoke with a kind of tired honesty, admitting that the life he had built had cost him more than it had ever given him. Relationships broken, trust that could never fully exist, not even among people who called themselves family. A constant, exhausting vigilance that never allowed him a single moment of true peace. "And Sophia's mother?" Maria asked gently, though she immediately worried she had overstepped. Vincent's expression softened with a different kind of pain. "She passed away when Sophia was 2, he said quietly. "Illness, not anything related to my work, if that's what you're wondering. Since then, it's been just the 2 of us. I tried to keep her separate from everything, tried to build a normal life for her despite everything happening around us. I thought I had more time before the world I built finally caught up to us." He explained, carefully and without excessive detail, about the betrayal that had forced them to run, about the danger that still followed them even now, weeks later, in a town Maria had once considered impossibly quiet and safe. "I never meant to put you in danger," he said, his voice heavy with genuine regret. "I should have kept my distance from the start. It wasn't fair to you." Maria sat quietly, processing everything he had shared, feeling a complicated tangle of emotions she could not easily untangle. Fear, certainly. The world he described was one she had only ever seen in movies, filled with dangers she could barely comprehend. But beneath the fear was something else, something that surprised her: compassion, understanding, a recognition that circumstances, more than character alone, often shaped the paths people ended up walking. "Why are you still here?" she asked finally. "In this town, I mean, if it's dangerous." "Because Sophia is happy here," Vincent said simply. "For the first time in a long time, she has something close to a normal life, friends, stability." "You," he paused, meeting Maria's eyes directly. "I know I have no right to ask this of you, especially now that you know the truth. But please, whatever you decide, please don't let it affect how you treat her. She adores you. She doesn't need to know any of this." Maria felt her chest tighten at the pure, unguarded worry in his voice, the worry of a father terrified of losing the one good, stable thing he had managed to build for his daughter amid so much chaos. "I would never do that to her," Maria said firmly. "Whatever I decide about you, Sophia has nothing to do with any of this. She's just a little girl who deserves kindness, regardless of anything else." Relief washed visibly over Vincent's face, though the tension in his shoulders did not fully disappear. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I mean that." They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of everything shared settling between them. Finally, Maria spoke again, her voice quieter now, more thoughtful. "I'm not going to pretend I understand everything about the life you lived, or the choices you made along the way. But I've also watched you with Sophia enough times to know that, whoever you were before, the man sitting in front of me right now genuinely loves his daughter more than anything else in this world. That has to count for something." "It's the only thing that matters to me anymore," Vincent said, his voice rough with emotion he rarely allowed himself to show. "Then let's focus on that," Maria said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her own voice. "Whatever happens next, whatever danger might still be out there, you're not facing it completely alone." "Not if I can help it." Vincent looked at her with an expression somewhere between disbelief and profound gratitude. "You don't have to say that. This isn't your fight. It never should have become your fight." "Maybe not," Maria agreed. "But it kind of already is, isn't it? I gave you a sandwich on a rainy night, and somehow that turned into caring about a little girl who draws me pictures and asks me to save the good crayons for her. I don't regret any of it. I'm not going to start regretting it now just because I know the whole story." Something shifted in Vincent's expression in that moment, a kind of quiet awe that Maria had not seen from him before. In a life built on calculation and careful distance, here was someone offering loyalty freely, without demanding anything in return, without even fully understanding the risks she was choosing to accept. I need you to understand something, Vincent said seriously. The people looking for us, they aren't reasonable. They don't operate by rules most people would recognize. If they find us, if they connect you to us in any way, you could be in real danger. I won't let that happen. Not because of me. I appreciate the warning, Maria said, meeting his eyes steadily, but I'm not going anywhere. Not unless you tell me you genuinely want space, that you don't want me involved. Then I'll respect that. But if this is about protecting me from a choice I'm making with clear eyes, I don't need that kind of protection. Vincent studied her for a long moment, clearly torn between his instinct to push her away for her own safety and his growing reliance on the stability and warmth she had brought into both his and Sophia's lives. Finally, he nodded slowly. Okay, he said quietly. But please, be careful. More careful than you've ever needed to be before. Watch for anyone unfamiliar. Trust your instincts if something feels wrong. I will, Maria promised. They talked a while longer, working through practical details, ways Maria could stay alert, without drawing unnecessary attention, signals they could use if either of them noticed anything suspicious. It felt strange, planning for potential danger in the quiet, familiar space of the diner where she had worked for years, surrounded by ketchup bottles and laminated menus rather than anything resembling the world Vincent had described. Yet the seriousness in his voice left no room for doubt about how real the threat truly was. By the time Vincent finally left, disappearing into the night the same careful way he always did, Maria remained behind the counter for a long while, staring at the closed door, processing the enormity of what had just happened. She had learned the truth about a man she had come to care for, a truth that should have sent her running in the opposite direction. Instead, she found herself more committed than ever to protecting the fragile, unexpected family that had formed around a simple act of kindness weeks earlier. She did not know what challenges lay ahead, or how dangerous the coming days might become, but she knew, with a clarity that surprised even herself, that she was not going to abandon Sophia or Vincent simply because the truth had turned out to be more complicated than she expected. Some bonds, it seemed, were stronger than fear. She was about to discover exactly how strong that bond would need to be. 3 days after their conversation at the diner, the quiet town Maria had lived in her entire life stopped feeling quiet at all. It started with small things she might have dismissed on any other week. A car she did not recognize parked across the street from her apartment for nearly 2 hours. A man asking the gas station attendant strange questions about a family who might have recently moved into town, describing a little girl with dark curly hair and a father who kept mostly to himself. Maria heard about the gas station conversation from a regular customer who mentioned it casually over breakfast, having no idea how important the information actually was. Her stomach dropped the moment she heard the description. She excused herself quickly, stepping into the back kitchen to catch her breath and steady her racing thoughts. She sent Vincent a message immediately, using the signal they had agreed on. Someone's asking questions. Description: matches you and Sophia, gas station on Miller Street. His reply came within seconds. Stay where you are, stay visible, don't go anywhere alone. Maria spent the rest of her shift glancing anxiously toward the windows, her hands trembling slightly as she poured coffee and delivered plates, trying desperately to appear normal for the sake of the customers around her. Every bell above the door sent a jolt of adrenaline through her chest, and every unfamiliar face made her heart pound harder than it should have. Vincent arrived at the diner just before her shift ended, his expression tighter and more alert than Maria had ever seen it. He did not sit down. He stood near the counter, scanning the room and the street outside with quick, practiced movements. Where's Sophia? Maria asked immediately. Safe, with someone I trust completely, somewhere far from here. His voice was low, controlled, though Maria could sense the tension coiled beneath his calm exterior. I need you to listen carefully. Whoever is asking questions, they're close. Closer than I expected. This isn't a coincidence. What do we do? Maria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You go home, lock your doors, and don't answer for anyone except me, Vincent said firmly. I'm going to handle this. Handle it how? Maria pressed, fear sharpening her voice. Vincent, these aren't reasonable people. You said that yourself. I know, he said, meeting her eyes with a seriousness that left no room for argument. Which is exactly why I need you far away from whatever happens next. Maria wanted to argue, wanted to insist that she could help somehow, but the fierce protectiveness in Vincent's expression told her clearly that this was not a moment for negotiation. She nodded reluctantly, gathering her things quickly as her manager waved her off for the evening, unaware of the storm quietly building outside the diner's ordinary walls. Vincent walked her to her car, staying close, his eyes constantly scanning the parking lot and surrounding streets. "Straight home," he said. "Call me the second you're inside, with the doors locked." Maria nodded, sliding into her car with shaking hands. She drove straight home, checking her rearview mirror far more often than usual, relief flooding through her chest when she finally pulled into her familiar parking space, without any sign of being followed. She hurried inside, locked the door behind her, and immediately called Vincent as promised. "I'm home," she said the moment he picked up. "Doors locked." "Good," Vincent said, his voice tight with barely controlled tension. "Stay there. I mean it, Maria. No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, stay inside." The line went quiet after that, and Maria spent the next several hours pacing her small apartment, unable to focus on anything except the anxious churning in her stomach. She thought about Sophia, hidden away somewhere safe, probably confused and scared without fully understanding why. She thought about Vincent, facing danger she could not even begin to fully comprehend. Danger that had somehow, impossibly, become tangled up with her own quiet, ordinary life. Around midnight, just as exhaustion began to compete with her anxiety, a soft knock sounded at her door. Maria froze, her heart hammering violently against her ribs. She crept toward the door, checking through the peephole with trembling hands, relief flooding through her when she recognized Vincent standing outside, his expression exhausted but unmistakably relieved. She opened the door quickly, pulling him inside and locking it immediately behind him. "What happened?" she demanded. "Are you okay? Is Sophia okay?" "We're both fine," Vincent said, sinking onto her small couch as if his legs had finally given out beneath weeks of accumulated exhaustion. "The situation is handled, for now." "What does that mean?" Maria asked, sitting beside him, studying his face carefully. Vincent rubbed a hand over his tired eyes before speaking. "I made some calls. Old contacts, people who still respect certain arrangements even after everything that happened. I was able to negotiate a temporary truce, enough to buy us time. It won't last forever, but it should keep us safe for now while I figure out a more permanent solution." "A permanent solution," Maria repeated slowly. "What does that look like?" "Cooperation," Vincent said quietly, "with federal authorities. I've been in contact, carefully, through people who can be trusted, about providing information in exchange for protection. For Sophia, mostly. She deserves an actual future, not this constant running." Maria absorbed this information slowly, understanding the enormity of what he was describing. "That's dangerous," she said finally. "Isn't it? Turning against people you used to work with?" "Everything about my life has been dangerous for a very long time," Vincent said with a tired, humorless smile. "At least this way, there's a chance at an actual ending, a real one. Not just running until we can't run anymore." They sat together in comfortable silence for a long while, the adrenaline of the night slowly fading into quiet exhaustion. Maria found herself reaching over, placing her hand gently over his, a simple gesture of comfort and solidarity that needed no further explanation. "Whatever happens next," she said softly, "you're not facing it alone. I meant that before, and I still mean it now." Vincent looked at her, something shifting behind his tired eyes, a kind of quiet wonder that a person could offer such steady loyalty in the face of everything he had confessed. "I don't deserve that kind of support," he said quietly. "Not after everything I've done." "Maybe not," Maria agreed gently. "But Sophia deserves a father who's trying to change, who's trying to build something better for her. That matters more than anything you did before you decided to make things right." The following days passed in a tense, careful rhythm. Vincent worked quietly behind the scenes, coordinating with people Maria never met, arranging details she was not fully privy to, though he kept her informed enough that she never felt shut out of the process entirely. Sophia returned from her hiding place within a week, her joyful reunion with Maria at the diner bringing tears to both their eyes. though Sophia remained blissfully unaware of just how close danger had actually come. The immediate threat, at least, seemed to have passed, thanks to Vincent's careful negotiations and the temporary truce he had secured. But everyone involved understood that this was merely a pause, not a true resolution. The real turning point, the moment that would determine the future for all three of them, was still ahead, waiting on the other side of decisions that would require more courage than any of them had needed before. 6 weeks later, Maria sat in a small courthouse waiting room, twisting a paper cup of coffee between her hands, as she waited for news that would determine the shape of the rest of her life, and Vincent's, and most importantly, Sophia's. The cooperation Vincent had agreed to had unfolded exactly as carefully and quietly as he had promised. Months of confidential meetings, verified information, and careful negotiations finally reaching their conclusion. Vincent had spent the previous weeks working closely with federal investigators, providing detailed information that helped dismantle significant portions of the organization he had once controlled, particularly the faction responsible for the betrayal that had originally forced him and Sophia to flee. In exchange, he had been granted protection, a new identity for himself and his daughter, and, most importantly to him, a clean legal slate that would allow Sophia to grow up without the shadow of his past following her indefinitely. The process had not been easy. There were moments of genuine fear, nights when Vincent barely slept, worried that something might go wrong, that the people he was providing information against might discover his cooperation before authorities could offer adequate protection. Maria had stayed close through all of it, providing the kind of steady, quiet support that asked for nothing in return, simply present whenever Vincent needed someone to talk to, someone to help watch Sophia during the most tense periods, someone who treated their unconventional situation with patience rather than judgment. Finally, the courthouse door opened, and Vincent walked out, his expression difficult to read at first. Maria stood quickly, searching his face for any sign of the outcome. Then, slowly, a genuine smile spread across his features, the kind of smile Maria had rarely seen from him, unguarded and completely relieved. "It's done," he said simply. "All of it. We're free." Maria felt tears spring to her eyes as she crossed the room and hugged him tightly, the months of accumulated tension finally releasing in that single embrace. "Really free?" she asked, pulling back to look at his face. "No more running?" "No more running," Vincent confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "New names, new start, complete protection. Sophia can finally have the normal life she deserves." Sophia, who had been drawing quietly in the corner of the waiting room with a set of crayons Maria had brought along to keep her occupied, looked up curiously at the sound of celebration in her father's voice. "Are we happy?" she asked, her small voice carrying an innocent hopefulness that broke and mended Maria's heart simultaneously. "Very happy," Vincent said, scooping his daughter into his arms and holding her close. "Everything is going to be okay now, sweetheart, I promise." Over the following months, life slowly transformed for all three of them. Vincent, now living under a new name that Maria quickly grew accustomed to using, used a portion of legally protected assets to open a small hardware store on the edge of town, a modest business that kept him busy without drawing unwanted attention. It was ordinary work, the kind of steady, predictable life he had never imagined possible for himself, and he approached it with a quiet dedication that surprised even Maria. Sophia enrolled in the local elementary school, quickly making friends and thriving in a stability she had never previously known. She continued visiting the diner regularly, though now purely for enjoyment rather than necessity, always ordering the same turkey sandwich that had started everything, insisting it remained the best sandwich in the entire world, despite Maria's teasing that her tastes should probably expand eventually. Maria and Vincent's relationship deepened slowly and naturally over that time, evolving from careful friendship into something neither of them had expected, but both had quietly hoped for. It was not rushed or dramatic, simply a gradual recognition that the bond formed through crisis and honesty had grown into something lasting and genuine. Vincent proposed nearly a year after that first sandwich was shared on a rainy night, choosing, fittingly, to do so at the same diner counter where their story had begun. Maria said yes without hesitation, laughing through happy tears as Sophia jumped excitedly around them, already asking if she could be a flower girl, and whether there would be cake at the wedding. Word of their story eventually spread through the small town, not through any dramatic revelation, but through the natural curiosity that follows any deeply happy, unlikely love story. People learned, gradually and without judgment, about the unusual circumstances that had brought Maria and Vincent together, admiring the courage it had taken for both of them to choose kindness and honesty over fear and distance. Maria often reflected on how a single small act, giving away her last sandwich on an exhausting rainy night, had completely reshaped the direction of her entire life. She had expected nothing in return that night, had not given a single thought to any possibility beyond simply helping two hungry, tired strangers get through a difficult moment. Yet that small kindness had rippled outward in ways she could never have predicted, ultimately bringing her a family she had not known she was missing, and giving Vincent and Sophia a chance at a life built on stability rather than fear. Vincent, for his part, often told Sophia, as she grew older, about the importance of small kindnesses, about how a stranger's simple generosity had reminded him of a better version of himself, buried beneath years of hardened choices. He wanted his daughter to grow up understanding that goodness, real goodness, often showed up in the smallest, most unexpected moments, and that choosing kindness, even when it cost something personally, could change the entire course of a life. Years later, the diner remained a special place for their small, unconventional family, a place where an ordinary act of generosity had quietly, unexpectedly, become the foundation for an extraordinary new beginning. Maria still worked there occasionally, more out of fondness for the place than financial necessity, always keeping a particular booth near the window, reserved in her heart for the memory of a stormy night when everything had changed. And every so often, when a tired stranger walked through that same door, soaked from the rain and clearly struggling, Maria found herself reaching once again for whatever she had on hand to share, understanding now, more deeply than ever, just how far a single moment of genuine kindness could travel, and just how many lives it had the quiet, remarkable power to change.